let me record actually. We're going to call the actual thing I want to use to run this. Classroom, FTP. I didn't save it in the right file, in the right folder, so I'll have to change that. Turtle file reading .py. This guy needs to be saved somewhere else. Save as, not in teaching, but in classroom. There we go. Okay. So what we're going to do is, first off, import turtle. Okay. Not turtles, but import turtle. And what we're going to do is that simply we are going to say commands is equal to open turtle space boss dot commands. And you'll see that basically all this is just a bunch of files that have F, L, or R followed by a number, which stands for forward, left, or right. So you can create whatever you want. I did this very quickly with a bunch of copying and pasting. And you can create whatever folder you want. So turtleboss.commands, again, we're going to say it's a file I need to read. So for line in commands, before we make our turtle do anything, let's print out all the things that we want our turtle to do. Print line. Right? And we're just telling it to, and so here we can confirm that I'm reading the file. So the way I've set up this file is that basically I have the command I want the turtle to do followed by the argument that I'm going to use for it. So the line is broken up into needs to be broken up into two parts. So parts is equal to line dot split. Command is equal to, not commands, but command, the thing that I'm going to execute, is equal to the first part, parts 0, and amount is equal to parts 1. And the first part is always a string, but the second part is always a number, so I'll convert it into an int. Let's go ahead and run through it to make sure it doesn't break anything. Okay, it doesn't. Great. So it's fairly straightforward. What I'm going to say is that if I want the turtle to move in some way, shape, or form, all I have to do is say, okay, well, let's say we have to just look at what the command is. So if command equals F, then I want to move forward. So I'll say, well, first I have to make Bob. So Bob is equal to turtle.turtle. If command is equal to F, Bob.forward. And how much is he going to move forward? It's going to move forward the amount. If he gets an R, he's going to do a right turn by that amount. And if the command is L, Bob does a left turn by that amount. And that's it. It's really all I had to do for this one. So here, what I do, as you can see, I'm just drawing a bunch of circles. Oh, and turtle.done over here because I'm working outside of idle. Right? So that's all I had to do. So what it's doing over here is that it's reading line by line. It's reading this text file over here line by line. It says F100. So Bob reads that and he translates it to, okay, we split it up. We take the first part of it, the F, and then the second part, which is 100, we turn that into an integer and store it in an amount. And then Bob will say, hey, if the first part was an F, I'm going to move forward. If, on the other hand, the command is an R, I'm going to turn right. If the command was an L, I'm going to turn left. Right? And I could add this and make it as complicated or as uncomplicated as I wanted to. So for instance, I could do G100, 100. In this case, I might do something along, I might not do the amount, I might just care about the command. Instead, I might do this. Because now what the second thing is, what the second argument depends on what I'm doing. If command is equal to G, I would instead, because I'll use that for bob.goto. And now he's got part 1 and part 2 to go to. Oh, forgot my colon. Right, so now Bob will do all this stuff we were doing before, and now he moves to 100 as part of that. Right, so we can so Bob can do basically whatever the heck we want him to do, so long as we create the commands for him to do so. Okay. All right. So reading files is as you can see, is fairly straightforward. Writing files is almost as straightforward as well. So let's go ahead and I put some stuff up on RuneSong Academy for you to read. Again, what I care about is, are you just going through these and reading these? So let's see, image processing. So we've got functions, conditionals, transforming sequences, files, right? We'll learn more about dictionaries as we get down here, but so we can read a file, right? We've been reading a file over here, read the file. Let's see, what was the other thing? I want to see alternate ways to file reading methods, right? The read you can use to read the entire contents of it or end characters of it. We're not going to use that too much. It's also read line and read lines, but as you'll see, we'll have a there's a write method. So how does it work to write something? Now, writing is only, and I'm gonna, and I can't find a word more mild than mildly, so I'm gonna use it. Mildly dangerous if you're not careful, but not actually that dangerous. Writing a file because you know, well, you'll see in a sec. So to write a file, let's go ahead and see this. File write demo.py. Let's go ahead and put this over here. I'm going to put it in my classroom folder again. And again, let's go ahead and put it in an ITP. So again, what we do is that we use the same command. File, or let's go ahead and say target is equal to open. But here I'm not going to open a file that I already have. I'm going to open up a file that, a new file. I'm going to create my first file.txt. And then, because I'm going to, now when we were reading files, right, what were we doing? We were using read, R to read. So if we want to write something, anybody got a guess as to what we should put there instead? A W. So this says we want to write something. And if I run it, right, it doesn't immediately crash and scream at us, which is generally a good sign. So if we look over here into ITP, and I'm doing this because I actually don't really, notice that it's just created an empty file, my first file.txt. So that's all it needed to do to basically create a file like that. So I'm going to create a new file in that folder called, let's go ahead and call it let's go ahead and call this my super important thesis .txt. Okay, my super important thesis.txt. Very important file. This is a very important file. Do not delete. Everybody's got the idea here. So, if I go and then change this to my super important thesis and open that file in write mode, let's go ahead and take a look at my super important thesis. Ooh, says that's changed. Do you want to reload it? Let's reload it. So, important thing to know. The write command, what it will do is that it will create a new file. Name this file. Be sure to name it something that you don't want destroyed. Okay? It will otherwise completely overwrite that file with new data. So that's the first. There's only two things you have to worry about with files. The first is generally give your file a unique name, like not my super important thesis. Don't give it the name of something else in the same directory. Also note that when we created the file, it was just like you want to read something in the same directory as you. By default, you're going to be writing a new file in your same directory. Okay, right? It's in here in the same directory as the file write demo. So how do we actually produce text? How do we print out text to a file? We use target dot write hello, comma, world. Okay. And okay, let's go ahead and open up my first file and print it out hello world. Technically, what I should do after that is actually something called target.close, which will formally close everything. Reload. And there we go. It wrote it out. So writing is very easy. Rather than reading a file or iterating over it, you just simply do the file you want, this variable that represents the file that you just opened, and do target.write to write something out. Hello world. How are you? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark. Okay, run that, reload our file, and notice that basically it didn't. So also another thing, notice it didn't add hello world again, right? This is a feature, not a bug. It assumes when you want to write something, we're writing a new file. It did hello world, how are you? And notice it didn't put in any new lines. If you want a new line, you put in your own darn new line, right? But suppose actually what you wanted to do was not actually, let me just see. Okay. Suppose though that you don't want to overwrite what you have, right? Suppose actually you'd like to add on to the end of that file very much. So we have one more mode. There's read write, and then there's A for append, which is like write. I'm going to run it twice now. It's like write, but what it does is that it adds on to the end of a file. It adds on to what's already there. Now, I mentioned that this can be mildly dangerous. And the reason this is, I said that, is that because I'm going to write a new program called let's see, baby's first malware.py. Okay, and it's very, very, very simple. Open. So first off, because I don't want to clutter this up, I'm going to create a new directory. I can't write new directories by using the write command, but what I will do is just write a new directory over here. So malware test. Right. Calling this malware, by the way, is like, it's not really. It's just malware is anything created with an ill intent, right? And what we are doing here could be construed as ill intent, but it's also really easy to fix. Hence, Babby's first. So open. So here I'm going to create a loop for num in range. Let's just do 100. Okay. For num in range 100. Open a new file. Say target is equal to open num. So it was, what was the directory called? Malware test. So this will only work if you've created the directory. Malware test slash, to say I'd like to be inside of it, plus string num plus .txt. Right, so I'm basically making one string. It's going to be 1.txt, 2.txt, 3.txt, all the way up there. And all we're calling it is malware test slash. And again, calling this malware is really overselling this. Really by a degree. But it's like, again, if it's your first one, not too much. We're going to create write mode. And then for blank in range, let's go with 100,000. Target dot write. Ha 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 ha. Target dot close. That's it. Run. Takes a bit to run. But let's go ahead and check it out. Oh, there it's done. Just like printing out stuff, writing takes a bit of time. So let's go ahead and check our malware test folder. And we've got this 2 megabyte file that if I open it, this is a bit difficult because it's just one giant string because I didn't put any new lines in. Let's go ahead. I'm going to run this again, this time with new lines. Run it again. Here we go. It's overwriting the data over here. So now if I open this file up, notice it's got a bunch of ha-ha-ha-ha's. It's actually got a lot of them. Right? Modify the variables to your taste to eat up all the memory on the computer. Right? It's a very stupid malware. It takes forever to run. Doesn't do anything like eat up all the files. But, I mean, like, how much it created, in a couple seconds, 250 megabytes. Right? And it does it very fast. Again, it's not particularly hard because all you have to do is just like hit delete and it's done, right? And it's gone. But like, this is the other thing about it being dangerous. You could unintentionally write an infinite loop of stuff and just write out to your computer onto your disk and use up all your space. This is easily resolved by simply deleting what you just wrote, but more dangerous is accidentally overwriting what you have. But if I added one more digit over here, or one more digit over here, I'd suddenly be using 2.5 gigs of memory. Right? I mean, there's other kind of malware you can make, but and again, I don't really go into that for this class. It's beyond the scope of the class, but it's kind of it goes over the dangers of writing. That's not to say you shouldn't do writing, but basically writing things to disk is very powerful, right? Now, yeah, so you can, there's something we can use with for files. I'm not going to do it. Read this in case you run into it in the wild, like you're looking it up online, but we don't actually need to use with at all. So writing text files, right, you can just write numbers out, and that's pretty cool, which is useful, like, say, if I'm doing this file, if I'm doing these turtle things over here, right? Coming up with like the turtle boss.commands was actually a bit annoying. So there's nothing stopping us from writing a method that will create those turtle, a program that will write out a bunch of commands for a turtle, right? It will draw the stuff and then write each command as it draws it out. And then we can read it in another program to replicate all those steps. But for the most part, we will be using a lot of reading and writing for our data. All right, so that's pretty much what I've got for today. It's 3:05. So if you've got things you need to talk about. I know that some of you want to talk about the exam if you've had a grade or whatnot. So I'll be here for that.